Welcome back to your Daily Dose. My name is Robert. I'm here with Dr. Sara Whittingham. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. No tornadoes where I am, so I guess that's
Yes.
one benefit. Um, we talked once before, and then we got to see each other briefly at WPC. First off, how was your World Parkinson Congress?
It was overwhelming. It took me a couple weeks to process it all. I met so many people from all over the place. It was a lot.
I,
But
I don't think there's any way around that. It just is a lot, isn't it?
yeah, no, it was a great experience and I met
Yeah.
so many amazing people, and I'm looking forward to Quebec, but it
Yeah.
was definitely needed some recovery time after that.
It is a net positive, and I agree, and have heard that from many people. It's like it's wow. And I know I had another conference less than a week later, the ATMRD out of Washington, D.C., and I was a little flatlined when I went there at first. And it was a great conference, but it took me a
Right.
minute. I don't know if have you ever gone like anywhere we had to wear a wetsuit, like in the ocean somewhere, like a deep
Yeah.
dive? Have you ever had like a second dive where you got to put the wetsuit back on and it's not really, it feels, that's what it
Yeah.
felt like going to the
Yeah.
conference. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it'll be okay once I get in the
It's
ocean.
like,
But
yeah, get going. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
but
well, it is about connecting. These types of things, we put ourselves out there. Certainly, I mean, your book is about connecting. And within, I know one of the things I read, you talk about taking back control being part of Parkinson's, right? Not losing your identity to that. So, how much for you, and maybe either on top of that, than your research is Parkinson's about taking back or refinding your identity?
I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. I spoke to a group yesterday, and when we get the diagnosis, I feel a lot of people take that as a change in their identity. I'm now somebody who is sick and somebody who is going to be incapable, and they start thinking of all the things that go along with Parkinson's, and that automatically becomes part of their identity. So I think it's important, really important for people to realize that they're still the same person they were before they were diagnosed. And they probably had Parkinson's for years before that and they didn't know it and they were living their lives and doing great. And now they have the diagnosis, they have tools to help them, do
Right.
better. So yeah, I think the identity and the control thing, I mean, we are super fortunate to have things that we can do to control our future. There's a lot of disease processes where there's just nothing that you can do at all. It just is gonna, it is what it is. But fortunately, there are things that we can do, which I think is, a gift there are things that we can do. So, yeah, it's definitely a huge part of, my advocacy is helping people understand how to take control. Um, I'll kind of veer off a little bit. I started working on a workbook to go with the book, and as I sat down to write it, I realized that the way I had been approaching Parkinson's came a lot from what I had learned in my career as a flight surgeon and in anesthesia, as
Mhm.
far as aviation safety principles. So, I had served as an aircraft mishap investigator for two aircraft mishaps in the Air Force. I did a lot of patient safety teaching in the anesthesia, applying those same principles. So, the underlying premise is that humans will make mistakes. There's no way around that. Even the smartest, healthiest, brightest, well-meaning humans will make a mistake. So it's important that we develop systems around that human to prevent that mistake from causing harm. And so that's the basic underlying premise of, why all the checklists and why all the, backups to backups for safety is to have systems around the human that protect, keep the rest of us safe. And so as we apply that to Parkinson's, I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to look at it that way. You don't blame the person who made the mistake, you blame the system around the person. So, you forget to take your medication. What system would have prevented that? If I had another phone on my alarm and it kept going off every 10 minutes until I, hit stop, or, having a system that prevents that. The same thing with exercise, having somebody who's going to call you if you don't show up to the gym, having different things that will help keep you. And so I think it was an interesting kind of epiphany to me. I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been using the same approach to things, you know, listening, communication is a big part of safety in the aviation world. You should always speak up if you see something that's unsafe. And as the leader, you should never criticize somebody for speaking up. But a lot of
Mhm.
times we with, and I look as us with Parkinson's as a pilot in this situation. And a lot of times it's hard to hear those things. You don't want to hear people say, "Are you sure you should be driving?" Or you've kind of been tripping a lot lately. I mean, those are things we don't want to hear, and it's easy to snap back. But I think some can be a missed opportunity to try to catch those problems earlier when there's still room to make a bigger difference. So trying to help use a lot of those principles, to kind of it's finding its way into this workbook. It's turning into aviation safety applied to Parkinson's. But I think,
I
it's an
love it.
interesting framework as I started looking at it. There's, simulating things, simulating things that are likely to cause us problems. How do you get up from the floor if you fall? How do you call for help if you're on the floor in your living room? What are you going to do? And
Yeah.
thinking through those in advance, like in a simulated situation. So it was really interesting to kind of think of it through that lens.
I love the application, like you said, of your expertise. And also, by the way, for anybody who's never been a pilot, myself included, how cool to get the insight into that world and go, "Ooh, I get to live like a pilot, even if I never actually fly the plane." I see and hear the applicability immediately in everything you just said. And because you also have, the clinician standpoint, I wonder about this because it feels like you're edging on this, but I don't know if this becomes as there is in medicine, sometimes, borders. The example is exercise is medicine, right? Prior to, say, 2010, exercise is medicine, was not a clinical term, not something, most doctors were saying, right? The evidence
Right.
since that time it becomes so obvious that people say, okay, it's not a good idea or something you should do. It's like, no, it's medicine. And I know words matter. Now that's really clinically accepted. I wonder, connection is what I'm hearing you say. Is that something because now doctors prescribe exercise. That happens. Could doctors prescribe connection or is that a bridge too far?
No, and that's something I feel strongly about. I feel that I have gained more from others in the Parkinson's community than from anything I learned in a medical textbook or from any of my physicians or, physical therapists or anything else, but from others who have been living it. And I think a lot of times that it goes unrecognized. So that's one piece of connection is connecting with our community. And I think especially the younger people with Parkinson's who, are still working full time, just trying to get, don't have even time to process the diagnosis. When I spoke at YOPD Con last year in Seattle, they asked people to raise their hand who had never even met this, saying that this was the first time they'd met somebody else with Parkinson's. And I was shocked at the number of hands had gone up. I mean, it was kind of heartbreaking. And people came up to me in tears, like after even the first session, like, "Oh my gosh, like my life's not over." I was like, "Yeah, no, see other people who've been at this for 20 years and you'll see, there's a path. You just, unless you see somebody else living it, there's not there." So yeah, and then the connection piece as far as just our broader world too is really key.
You just hit on exactly where I was going with that, which is, just like the word exercise, there's multiple domains. What do you mean by it? And right, how are we able to take it apart? Because not all exercise is the same. Not all connection is the same. And I think there needs to be more exploration and understanding within that too. As you mentioned, connection to self, identity, connection to those in an immediate circle, friends, family, maybe coworkers, and then connection to community broadly, those who, maybe we don't know, but would provide that larger safety net, like you mentioned, because they're going to understand more of what's going on. And then even I would say something larger is connection to the unknown. And this is really where I try to play is
Right.
connection to the possibility that instead of just recovering who you were or saying, I'm still me, this is just my language here, it's like saying, who might you become if you
Right.
were to allow that, right? And this
Right.
redefining of the identity. Does that track?
No, absolutely. And I think, I in the workbook, I'm using the analogy like when I was diagnosed, I felt I was on an unavoidable collision course with the side of a mountain. And as I
Mm.
met other people, I was able to find my way around, to find a different path. And I'm an introvert. Who would have thought that I'd ever become a public speaker and be, going around talking to groups of people and loving it? I never would have seen, anesthesia was a perfect career for me because I didn't really have to talk that much. So to totally pivot and find, I feel like I've helped more people in my role as an advocate than I ever did as a physician, which is really interesting to me. I like never would have seen this path that I ended up on, but it gives me a lot of joy and purpose, which is
I
another thing
love
that's
that.
really important.
when you say I never would have seen, those are some of my favorite words for people when they're discovering pieces of themselves, and in my own experiences when that happens too. I was talking to Ryan Cotton, who's a friend, with Rocksteady Boxing, and he
Mhm.
talks a lot about how people walk into the gym for the first time and go, "That's not me." Like they couldn't imagine. They've never thought about slipping on the gloves. They've never thought about standing in a ring and certainly swinging, and they're not punching each other. We know that. But it's that identity thing, kind of like you said, never would have imagined. And until we take the step, we couldn't. I get it in my classroom, and when people they hear about, oh, cinema therapy sounds interesting, then they hear about writing, they go, I could never see myself as a writer. It's like the block happens. And I guess the part of what I'm looking for here is how do you address people who are maybe caught in that I could never, or I can't imagine myself. And part of it might have to do with, the
Yeah.
stigma, the fear, or whatever of the diagnosis if they're stuck in it. How do you address those that are stuck in the I could never loop?
Yeah. So in the workbook and the book, but in the workbook, I'm a little bit more vocal about it. But, some of the people who have done the most amazing things, they've come up with the most amazing goals. And so I have in my workbook, I'm calling it the epic shit hypothesis. Like, come up with the most epic thing that you can imagine yourself doing. Like, even if it seems totally outrageous and impossible, and that there seems to be something about that that helps people with Parkinson's overcome the apathy and moving forward. And so even if it seems totally outrageous, but just having the thought, I wonder if I could. How awesome would that be if I could? Can you even imagine like having those thoughts about and being passionate about something, I think can really help, focus the negative energy because we tend to perseverate on things. So instead of perseverating on walkers and wheelchairs and how to get ready for that, why don't we perseverate on something totally crazy and outrageous? And so, but when I look like at people like Jimmy Choi or people who've sailed across the Pacific or climbed Kilimanjaro, I mean, there's so many amazing things people with Parkinson's have done that nobody would have ever thought. And it's only because they imagined it. And, it's the same thing, like having the courage to think of the most outrageous thing. And so I think that's one thing I would encourage people to do is just, sit back and say, well, what would make my life complete? Like if I'm sitting here talking to my grandchildren, like what's the craziest story I could tell them? Like what would be the coolest thing that I could do? And, and figure out, like take steps towards that. Like look it up. I wonder if anybody else has done this. How did they do that? What are the steps? And just thinking along those lines, I think can help a lot bring people out of that. Oh, I could never. Like you don't know till you start taking the steps. And I'm amazed. I'm so surprised. I've surprised myself multiple times. And I know, who'd have thought Jimmy Choi would have broken the burpee world record 20 years after his Parkinson's diagnosis, right? I mean, that's insane. So,
Absolutely. And that whole meditation on, or at least allowance for the impossible in one's life. I really agree with you that's the place. And if you want to frame it as what would my grandkids say when they heard this type thing,
or the
I
outrageous
love that.
dream is a more appropriate term, but I figured
Yeah.
with Michael J. Fox, F. Parkinson's, that thing going around, I could get away
You
with
can
a
say
little
whatever you
more.
want. Yeah, no, no. Fuck Parkinson's epic shit. You say whatever you want. We're clean here. The FCC has no burden on us. Um, But that idea of the impossible, I just want to drill into that for a second. We're running our class right now, the cinema therapy course with Rocky. And part of that's because we're working with the Rock Steady boxing community. And, that film, first of all, you've seen the movie, right?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to make sure. Sometimes I ask people and they go, no, I haven't seen it. I'm like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
Rocky, what happens, people forget because they think about, the epic run and him training and yo, Adrian, and, taking on
Yeah.
the first hour of that film, the more than half of it is spent to his kind of identity rehabilitation. He
Hmm.
thinks he's not just thinks, he's sure. I mean, he's entrenched in the fact that he's a bum. And it isn't
Hmm.
until, he's able to get the guts up to ask Adrian out, to let Paulie help him, that, he takes, he even accepts the fight. I mean, he's there like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll be your training partner. No, no, Rock, we want you to fight the champ. The impossible, right? He could have
Right.
never imagined. And what I love about that too, because the same way when we set goals is, he knows he can't beat Apollo, and that doesn't stop him from going. So
Hmm.
that crazy stuff, like you mentioned, what if, whether it was physical or let's take it off of that because I do think sometimes people get too caught up, and God bless Jimmy Choi and the others who are physically capable. The ones who have less physical capability,
Yeah.
you can still do epic things artistically, or like you said, public speaking wise. That's epic
Right. Oh,
too,
absolutely. Right. Yeah. Or even
right?
like, thinking like I'm having a hard time walking now, but wouldn't it be cool if I could be okay to walk my daughter down the aisle in 10 years? Like that's,
Epic.
that would be epic. Like, for me to be able to stand up and walk down the aisle 10 years, like, wow, like that would, give my life, that gives me something to work towards. So yeah, epic is different for everybody. And it could be, you know, planting the most beautiful garden and getting out there and doing that work every day or whatever it is for you, like whatever it is you're
Yes.
passionate about is what what lights you up. I realize not everybody gets excited about doing burpees or
I
running.
do, but yeah, I try to watch out for that because I do. I've seen Jimmy, and he's a friend too, enough times to where I see some people just go, "Oh my God, I could never," and it's like, no, you've missed the point. It's like he's not trying to tell you to break the burpee record. He's very careful about saying whatever your version of this is. He always delivers that. But sometimes you see him flying like the American Ninja Warrior and you get lost in that. And the I
Right.
could never is the bubble I'm trying to burst. And it sounds like you are too.
No, absolutely. Exactly. I mean, I think it's different for everybody. What is something that's going to make you excited when you're sitting on the couch deciding if you're going to get up and go for a walk today? Like, what's something that's going to say, well, I could sit here and do nothing, or I could take a step towards doing this, something that really excites me, or, something that, makes me excited. So,
There's something within that too that I don't know how much of your work crosses into this space, but it's a lot of where my research has gone is the value of support groups. That
mm,
we did research with PMD Alliance, and we're still working, hoping to do more because what we touched on was 1,100 respondents from the support group leader and support group attendee side. And
mhm,
one of the pieces of research that came out from that was they all saw the value in the groups. They saw it differently, what kinds of groups. However, they felt a disconnect with their healthcare providers. I think only 36% said they had a strong connection from the
mm,
support group standpoint, not necessarily individual, but from the
right.
support group standpoint within the community to the healthcare provider. And what we're supposed to do, but unfortunately, PMD Alliance lost the funding for, and we're still searching, is research the healthcare provider side to say, what are your attitudes about support groups? And, with no bias, just ask them openly, do you support your support group? If so, how? I mean, as far as like, would you prescribe a support group? Because this is on the connection level to somebody,
Mhm.
beyond, yes, of course, here's your carbidopa, you're prescribing exercise, hopefully. Would you prescribe a support group? How do you feel about that sort of thing? And maybe what is your feeling about support groups? Because it takes it beyond the individual side and into the communal.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. The connection with the Parkinson's community is key. And I've noticed that our mindset is incredibly contagious. And so it's really important to find a support group that has the positive energy that is going to help you. Because I've, been on some Facebook group discussions of people who are in this doom and gloom spiral.
That's
And,
right.
they comment like somebody's doing something well and they like make some negative comment about, oh, good for you, aren't you lucky? Something that's just
Must be
not
nice.
right? Like, well, that doesn't help anybody, like, right? So for support groups, I think it's really important to, monitor the energy of the room because that can be so contagious and help to redirect some people who may be struggling, focusing on all that's negative. But realizing that some people just need time and, maybe being around more positivity. As far as support groups go, I mean, I haven't really done it many like sit down support groups, but I
Right.
feel, going and exercising with groups of people with Parkinson's has kind of become my support group. And I think that just adds so much because there's not like a pressure to talk. Oh, I have to talk, but people kind of solve problems and say, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. And they're kind of joking about it and, making light of something that's hard, in a way that's where they're still working. And it's not about being there to talk about everything that's hard. They're there to get the exercise. And by the way, we're going to, talk about everything else that's going on. So I
Well,
really like
you
that approach is the exercising together piece of it.
exactly. I was just going to say you brought it up that a lot of support groups they come, I mean, to a person, as far as I've seen in research, they come from the right place in the heart. People want the best case scenario. Sometimes they lack the training as a facilitator. I think many do because no one else had it, so I had to build it, right?
Mhm.
And they maybe structurally only know, I guess we're going to sit in a circle and talk as if that was just what they knew for whatever reason. Support could be so many different things. And what I loved about what you said about exercise is the same thing I'm trying to build within support groups is an external focus, right? People aren't going to complain if they have
Right.
something external. The model we're using with support group leaders right now, we're going to pilot this program, is to have external things like a song, some improv games very easily taught, and then a film clip. And a film clip where we get to see it differently. It's not to study the film, but to say, do we see the struggle and support or lack of support going on in this clip? For example, using Shawshank Redemption, my favorite film, when Andy shows up at the prison, talk about a lack of support, right? And fish out of water and all that. And how does he feel about it? And how does the group assessing him feel about it? And then have people talk about what they see in the film, and then flip that and say, oh, how did I feel when I walked into my first support group? Did I feel of a prisoner in my Parkinson's? Did I feel like others were judging me for my tremors or lack thereof, this, that, and the other? So we've given an external focus instead of just saying, how are you today? And like you said, the worst stuff floods in.
Right. People tend to come to the support group to talk about what's wrong. And, I mean, rightfully so to some degree, but I think, just making sure the mindset and the approach is tilted towards, a positive mindset and finding solutions rather than,
Right.
feeling sorry for ourselves.
And
Because I,
how can we connect, right? I mean, if the focus is on how do we connect, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, do we connect to people that are, like you say, displaying a lot of negative behavior all the time? Usually not. I mean, not in a way we'd like to connect. If we're attracted to people, it's because what? They're open, they're vulnerable, they're kind, they're good listeners. And we go, oh, this is more of that, please. So learning how to do that can itself be, a skill.
right. And I've noticed too, there's people I talk to where I feel like I get energy back. I give energy to conversation and I feel so much more energy back. And there's people I talk to that I just, the phone rings and I look at it, I was like, oh, this is going to be a challenge, right? So, people, there's those, we need some of each in our life, hopefully more of the people that give us back energy, but recognizing that that's happening and, trying to surround us more with the people who make us feel more energetic than drain us is part.
Well, imagine one of those calls and then getting a call. It's like robocaller, and you're like, "Ooh, do I take the robocaller to get off of this?" I totally get what you mean. This is going to take some work. You phrased that perfectly. In your book, you mention storytelling to help people understand Parkinson's, right? And the use of storytelling, right? How do stories help us in ways that brought you? Because people look, they think information is the end of it, but stories actually give us a different frame. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Right. So as I finished my workbook and I hadn't actually looked to see what other Parkinson's Foundation, everybody else has for workbooks, but I started glancing at those today, actually, now that my workbook's finished. And I was like, there's
Mhm.
no there's not as much like personal stories. I mean, that's what connects, but that's what makes that connection.
Mhm.
And I think of, I don't know if you know Karen and Mark Jaffe here in Cleveland. I mean, Mark was a stand-up comedian, wrote for
Yes.
Seinfeld for a while, amazing. But he does a really good job about talking about the things that may be a little bit uncomfortable. And he wrote an essay for the New York Times about, seesawing libidos and how, his wife's hypersexuality affected his life. And he needed to go talk to his doctor about Viagra because he couldn't keep up with his wife's Parkinson's medications, things like that. Being open and talking about things that might be a little bit difficult or maybe embarrassing for some people makes it easier for other people to talk about those things in a way that's makes it not seem so threatening or embarrassing. So I think he does a great job of empowering people by, talking about some of his challenges that, make a lot of men might not want to talk about. But I think it's empowered a lot of people to talk about these things.
Well, he does. I mean, that's one technique, like you mentioned, is humor too, right? And certainly he's going to infuse with humor, and also that odd splash of vulnerability, the unexpected. Oh no, is we're talking about that thing. It's like I thought that was only me, and then all of a sudden, when someone else lights it up over here, there's a connection of light between you two, and you're like,
Mhm.
thank God I'm not alone. thought
Right.
that I thought it was just me, kind of like that's not me, like we talked about. The other one is I thought it was just me. And
Right.
isolation is where people go to have terrible outcomes. And we can
Absolutely.
isolate emotionally, right?
And I think, I mean, a lot of people after diagnosis, I mean, that first year after diagnosis is incredibly dangerous. I mean, I saw somewhere it's about a twofold suicide rate over somebody not with
Oh
Parkinson's.
my goodness.
But when you look at it, a lot of people are afraid to talk to their families or talk to their coworkers. So they become isolated and they're scared and they've got all this neurotransmitter craziness, probably causing a lot of anxiety, that's, just compounding itself. And so, trying to catch those people in that first year, I think is so critical because it is a time when people, I think a lot of people isolate it because they just like, oh, I don't want people to think of me as disabled or, feel sorry for me. And there's a million reasons why people don't share their diagnosis. But trying to connect with those people, which is why I think, getting our physicians and, to help refer those and connect those people sooner with the community rather than later, because I think uh, that initial year can be really scary for a lot of people.
Well, you've probably heard this. It comes up almost every talk. People talk about how they delay taking their medication, many people, right when they
Yeah.
start, because, they fear the long-term effects, which I understand. My dad was very much in that camp. But it's not just medication that they delay. They delay the socialization. They delay the sharing because you mentioned the way people isolate. People can isolate in plain sight,
Hmm.
right? They might still be showing up to work and school, whatever, but internally, because of everything you mentioned, they're isolating. They're allowing less and less of themselves out because they fear more and more. And gosh, that person can, I think, quickly become a shell of themselves because they don't feel comfortable being their full selves. And there's no fault here. It's just a bunch of plugged up emotions on one side, a family, friend, workforce who might know broadly, but they're like, we're scared to ask. And this person's saying, I'm scared to say. And slowly what happens is they just drift apart painfully.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that connection and trying to encouraging people to at least connect with somebody, that they can be open with, because it's exhausting to try to hide your symptoms, and it gets harder over time as well, too. So somebody who's maybe trying to hide their diagnosis at work, fortunately, I was in a position where I felt comfortable being very open from the get-go, but it would have been, I would have been worried people were talking behind my back, and,
Oh, yeah.
and so I was like, I'm just going to put it out there. And I was lucky that I felt comfortable doing that, but I understand, a lot of people aren't in that same position. So it's hard.
My research showed that exactly. My class is exactly what you're saying. It's such an interesting point about, what people are and aren't willing to share. When I first started doing the cinema therapy course, as part of the PhD program, I was having people write their personal story. And what was interesting was, by about the fifth week of the 16-week cycle, people kind of they stopped. And a lot of people just stopped writing at that point. They didn't want to go forward with they had done enough. And a lot of people even weren't too happy with going back into the traumatized part either. And so it took a while, but what we came to, and I think this has been an entirely freeing thing, is what we call aesthetic distance. And it allows people we all but forcibly, unless people have a really strong case and want to be like you and say, no, no, I'm telling my story with high stakes, and that works. But a lot of people really struggle with that. And let's say that 95% of people do struggle with that. The gift of aesthetic distance says you're not going to write about you. You're going to write about a fictional character. Well, if I'm writing about a fictional character, why does it matter? Well, they can have Parkinson's if you like, or somebody in their life can have Parkinson's. And now, by the way, Parkinson's comes in all kinds of shades and spectrums. They can either share or not share any piece of themselves that they like, but the human connection to that person going through something, the storytelling by writing fiction, a story demands ups and downs. It demands stakes, peaks and valleys
Yeah.
that most people in telling their personal story don't do. They tell flatline dead stories. They're like, yeah, everything was fine and I'm pretty good and life was a little scary, but now I'm okay. It's like that story is not going to intrigue anybody.
Right.
We watch the stories with these big ups and downs. If it's not really us, that's freedom. And yet we get to, as the author, disclose as much or as little as we like within that, and always with the shell of it's a piece of fiction. How does that strike you as maybe a one-off to allow people who struggle to tell their own story, but still want to be heard? Does that
No,
make
it's
sense?
No, absolutely. It's so funny that you bring this up because as I did the workbook, I tried to, mirror it along with the hero's journey. And when we look,
That's exactly.
right? So when we look at a hero, what makes them heroic is they have to overcome some obstacle. I mean, you're not a
Mhm.
hero if everything just goes great your whole life and you don't have any challenges. That's pretty boring. Like nobody wants to hear about that, right?
True
People
story.
want to see like, the hard things that you didn't think that you were going to be able to do that you did, and you faced your fears and you moved on. And so I think Parkinson's gives us an incredible opportunity to be heroic because now we have this huge obstacle that we get to find a way to overcome, and there's a huge number of people that could use help with that too. So it's really, I look at it, it is an opportunity to put make our stories more heroic because it's that challenge. It's that my kids like did not like scary movies. Like even Scooby-Doo was too much when they were younger, right? They're like,
Wow.
why is there always the bad guy? Why does it always have to be a scary part?
Because
Right? Like, and I was like, well, it would be boring otherwise. Like, every story has to have some challenge or some bad guy or something bad that happened to make it interesting. So, like, I look at this as like, wow, this gives me, an opportunity to do good and to, overcome these challenges. So, when you look at, the hero's journey, this is one of those things that, could set us apart and help other people. So,
Something you said right there just struck me because we're so well met on the hero's journey. I mean, Joseph Campbell's totally my guy too.
oh yeah.
But it's the acceptance, and I think this is where medicine sometimes flattens people, not by intent, but by, the intent to comfort. I hear this from many clinicians, well-meaning ones, who try to, in the diagnosis, go, it's not that bad. It could be worse. And I hear patients mirror that same thing. And what's happening is anytime they feel it is that bad, they're like, no, no, the doctor said it's not that bad. I must be wrong. It's like, wait a minute. We have to accept this is that bad and accept the worst case scenario, which includes maybe seeing the person in the wheelchair 25 years into their diagnosis, whatever, and going, is that me? Well, not today,
Right.
right? But if you don't accept the fear, and frankly, and this is the hard part, the reality, we can look at Michael J. Fox, the man who's gotten the best of the best. He's struggling really hard. That's
Hmm.
the reality of Parkinson's. It sucks, it's unfair. And so by giving ourselves the freedom and the reality, the acceptance of it is that bad, we've given ourselves the first peak, haven't we? And maybe the
Right.
first valley, right? Now
No,
we've got a story. So we have to
right.
accept it is that bad.
Yeah, I say embrace it. Like, yeah, I have these challenges and I'm doing this anyways. And, this
There
is
it is.
right. And so, and I translate that onto mental health. So what I'm, a big proponent of people talking about their mental health challenges. And, I think Parkinson's gives us a unique gift too, in that the disease itself can lead to anxiety and depression. So it's, maybe a reason that people could talk more openly about, I've been struggling with depression and anxiety. I'm taking medications now, I'm getting counseling, and it's helping like within their non-Parkinson's community, within their church communities and faith communities and families,
Yep.
because you talking about those things makes it easier for other people to talk about those things and to go get help. And so, another way we can become heroic, Parkinson's gives us this gift that, okay, yeah, now I've got mental health issues that, now I can use that to help other people who may be afraid to speak up, right? So, look at some of these interesting opportunities to help others that Parkinson's gives us.
I think we're close enough here to where I can offer you this is a first time challenge. You ready? You get to be my first person for this. Sarah,
Okay.
finish this sentence. Repeat the phrase in here. Connection is medicine because
Oh my God.
I know.
Pressure. Um, wow. Yeah, I don't, wow, that's connection is medicine because we're able to gain from energy and support from other people that helps us overcome these challenges. It's really hard to go through something on your own, but when you have a team of people with you, it makes it, you can overcome anything, right? I mean, I look at, one example I use, which maybe people can't relate to, but I was deployed to Afghanistan when my daughter was 6, but it sucked, in a war zone, with young people coming in getting shot, Afghani kids coming in with legs, I mean, it was awful. But I was there with a huge group of friends from college, who happened to be doctors at the same time, and going through those same things together, made it bearable and tolerable, and being able to go run at the end of the day and talk about it together. I mean, that made that not an awful experience, right? So but that connection, going through something difficult and hard with other people who are going through the same thing, it is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And, Parkinson's is the same thing. We're all going through, different levels of the same stuff. But, going through it with other people, makes it bearable and
It's
fun sometimes
beautiful.
when you don't expect it to be fun. Right? I mean,
Yeah,
I would never thought I'd have fun in Afghanistan, but I mean, I had, actually had quite a bit of fun. So, you
I
know,
think we could do that, right? It's not you're not trying to say it's all good. You're trying to say you opened yourself up to the possibility. And just your phrase, like I never thought I'd have fun in medicine. I never thought I'd have fun with Parkinson's. And my dad said almost those exact words back on our first visit to the first Boys of Summer is 2004. He's 3 years into his diagnosis. Pretty early onset. And it was the first interview we did in Arizona at the first ballpark. And he said, if there's a positive side to Parkinson's, I guess this is it. And it helped him frame, yeah, the disease sucks. However, I'm going to go and meet people all across the country in all different states dealing with all sorts of stuff and get a better vision for what this means, my trajectory, what I'm going to live with this thing. And,
mhm.
I mean, I didn't think too much about it at the time. It was more my dad and I connecting, but 20 plus years later, I can look back and go, that was one of the most important things we did was full acceptance, full embrace, because the first 3 years of his diagnosis, we didn't do hardly anything. I mean, mom had stage 4 breast cancer. We were very much focused on her. But once we opened up to it, it's like, we got to get in front of this because neither of us know what it means, and we're not just going to let the white elephant hang out and do nothing.
Yeah. No,
So
it's true.
I love that you
Connection.
embrace that Afghanistan story. It made me think, I mean, when you've seen MASH, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Does that feel like you to a degree? I mean, because somehow they ended up being human beings and sometimes having fun in a
Yeah.
horrible situation in Korea.
No,
And
absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, we started watching it again recently. And after watching that and listening to Alan Alda's podcast, I reached out to his team. I was like, how cool would it be if I could be on his
oh,
podcast? I haven't figured out that yet, but I did send him a copy of my book. I don't know
okay,
if he
cool.
got it, but, I was like, because I actually was stationed in Korea for a while too. So I was like, we have all these like parallels. I was a doctor in Korea. I was an anesthesiologist working in operating rooms in a war zone. We have Parkinson's, I was like, how cool would that be to bridge that gap. But, MASH was exactly a perfect example of, horrible, what could have been a horrible situation, but you have a group of friends who come together and, find a way to make it fun and interesting. So, yeah,
And this is where I think sometimes miss it. It's again, it's not that you're saying it's great. It's horrible and it's beautiful. It can be both things. This is, I guess, the truest
right,
definition of life to me is bittersweet. I mean,
right,
and this is why I think the hero's journey works with you too, because again, the reality is, yeah, things are going to be great and then they're going to suck and then they're going to get better and then they're going to suck again even worse. And it's like,
right.
that's the
Yeah,
deal.
more sucks. Parkinson's sucks, right? I mean, you've got this thing that, this big elephant or bear or something scary that sucks.
Yeah.
But when you're working around it with other people, I mean, it can become something that, brings me different meaning and purpose and fun even. So yeah, absolutely.
There it is. And isn't it funny that has to go in parentheticals almost, fun even. I, I,
Very,
I do that all the time in my talks. I say, is it okay if we have some fun today? And people are like, yeah. Oh, really? You sure?
we
Yeah.
love
No, I mean,
you,
can we have
right?
fun? Yeah.
Allowed,
Can we
right?
laugh? Is that okay? Yeah. No, seriously, can we laugh?
Right.
And you hear that. I think there's the performative side of Parkinson's, and it happens all the time at these conferences. You've seen it, I'm sure, where people are like, okay, I'm here to learn. Go ahead and give me the information. It's like, what if you weren't here for anything except for a laugh and a new friend? What if that
Right.
was what you were here for, right? I mean,
No,
wouldn't it be,
absolutely. I
right?
got more out of WPC from talking to people in the hallway than sitting through any of the sessions.
Oh,
But I was like, man, I'd rather be out there talking to people.
I
There's
don't
so
want to
many.
offend the sessions, but yeah, you know
No,
where my
no,
sessions were?
absolutely. They were great
Exercise
sessions. Yeah,
sessions, the support group sessions, the movies, those
yeah,
things. That was where, yeah, because you're right. The information's fantastic. I got my PhD. You got your MD. You're like, I've done this.
yeah. No, but it was, I did attend some few, and I learned a lot. But it was like,
Yeah.
man, I had a lot more fun, I should say, which I guess is the way most things are, about talking to people.
Yeah.
But
Well, let me wrap with this then that, because it sounds like, and by the way, thanks for taking the challenge. You did beautifully with the connection is medicine thing. If connection is medicine, if we're going to go with that, which I appreciate you walking down the path, what is the disease that connection's treating?
Loneliness, I think. I mean, I think there's a I mean, it's been well said, said, the loneliness epidemic, especially among older people too, is a huge problem. And in my workbook, I'm trying to, the things that can lead to loneliness. So our difficulty communicating. And so, why maintaining our voice is so important, because when you have a hard time speaking, people may cut you off or try to speak for you. And it's important that you let those around you continue to let you use your own voice. And I talk about hearing, like, it's not a Parkinson's issue, but it can affect our our connection later on. If we're not able to hear what's going on around us, then that can lead to cognitive decline more quickly as well. So, when you're out exercising, don't blast the music in your ears so you can still hear who's talking to you when you have a hard time talking later. Right. So like thinking about some of those things, about maintaining our connection as time goes on is really, really important, because it's like, I look at it, it's kind of a downward spiral. Like once you start have difficulty communicating, it can, it's, I don't know, it's one thing that kind of scares me a little bit is, if I do have, seeing people who have a hard time communicating, and, seeing people, cut them off or try to speak for them just because they don't have the patience to wait for what they're trying to say, is, something that I think our community can work toward helping each other with too. So,
Amen to that, because you're right. Communication styles are different. Brain patterns are different. All these things are different. Let us make space for all voices, and therefore we can all connect. Yeah,
yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. So,
that's
yeah,
wonderful. Well,
great.
thanks so much for your time, Sarah. This
Yeah,
was
thank you.
beautiful.
I feel
And
like I get like some counseling talking to you. I was like, oh, I feel better now. Like it's like
well,
therapeutic for me, right?
you're always welcome to come to our Jam for Joys. The improv sessions are exactly like this. They are
Right.
connection. And if you ever, the cinema therapy thing, I know you've got your book already, but I mean, if you ever think about like doing a fictional
Yeah.
thing, come play with us. I think, I mean, that's more like it's a curriculum course as opposed to the improv is dropping. But
Yeah.
you could have your own MASH story that could relegate some of your Afghanistan without all of your Afghanistan. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because it
Right.
would give you, I think, some freedom to tell that in a way that, and I'm just proposing right now, that wouldn't hold you to the exact of what happened. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah,
So there's my
absolutely.
pitch.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Sarah, thanks for your time. Reach out
Thank you.
anytime. And like I said, come to the drop-in of the improv. That's easy. Tuesdays and Thursdays, and just anytime you like. Okay. We'd love to see you
Okay.
there.
No, excellent. Thank you. One other question before you give,
Yes,
would you mind if I sent you a draft of my workbook? You don't have to read the whole thing, but just to
I'd be
flip through it
honored.
and
No,
kind of see
please.
from your perspective what other things, because I'm trying to, like I said, trying to follow the hero's journey through the workbook. Like, who am I
Yes.
now? And, and then going through some, entering the dark tunnel and talking about the scary things. So I'd be interested in your feedback and how to make it more help engage people more. So,
Send it my way, and then let's talk further, because I'm doing this whole Connection is Medicine tour right now with the
mhm.
latest Third Base film, and then the Connection is Medicine is like a symposium.
Yeah.
Having that in your neck of the woods, are you in Cleveland proper or
Yeah. Well, East Cleveland.
around?
Yeah, near Cleveland.
Cleveland
Yeah.
Metropolitan or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Yeah. Because I definitely, we should come. I'm going to put Cleveland on my map. I mean, I have like 22 cities right now. We're trying to set up like a whole tour, and having you there, because there's a panel part of this. It's like the film, a discussion, Q&A, lunch, and then a Connection is Medicine sort of
Mhm.
umbrella session where everybody's bringing their version of connection to the table. And your guide is exactly like I have a field guide. We should have active things that people are doing. So they're not just being lectured to or talked to. I love that.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's great. Always a pleasure
Send it
talking
my
to you.
way.
Yeah,
All
I will
right,
send it
Sarah.
right on. So awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Have a great
Okay.
dose. Take care.
Thanks and bye.